Hey there, welcome to the More Miles podcast. I'm Lauren,
I'm Scott.
I'm Michelle.
and we are the More Miles Run Coaching team. Welcome to the JFK 50 mile episode. Our podcast today is all about the JFK 50 mile race, which is coming up. We are just 1 month out from race day. So, in this episode, you are going to find all of the insider information for the race. And we also have guest interviews with Devon Yanko, who is a professional runner who has run this race multiple times, as well as Anthony Kunkel, who has also run this race multiple times, a professional athlete himself. So we will get to hear from them about their JFK 50 mile experience, as well as their tips for running your best JFK 50. Before we get to that, if this is your first time listening, I wanted to introduce to you a little bit about who we are. We are the More Miles Run Coaching team. We are an established online run coaching business. We have been coaching athletes online we are in our 9th year now. And we've been coaching athletes for this race specifically for 6 years. So ultra is not our specialty. We actually, between the three of us, we coach athletes of all abilities who are training for all distances, from your first 5K all the way up to the 100 and 200 mile distances and everything in between. We train athletes who are training to finish a distance, as well as athletes who are training to cover their fastest in a distance. We work entirely online. So we are based in Hagerstown, Maryland, the home of the JFK 50 mile, but we serve athletes all over the country and coach remotely online. So that's who we are. If you would like a little bit more information about us or about each of us individually, our website is moremilestogo.com, or you can find us on social media at More Miles Run Coaching. Okay, without further ado, let's talk all things JFK 50 mile.
All right, so I'm here with two veteran JFK 50 milers as well. I don't think you gave yourself enough credit in the intro, but Lauren and Scott have each done this multiple times. So I'm going to play host this episode instead of Lauren and interview the experts. And I want to start off by asking, what makes this race so special?
All right. So I get to talk about JFK, huh? Like
Yeah.
that's what I love to do. Okay. So what makes it so special? So there's a lot of reasons why the race is special. I think first and foremost the history. It is the oldest ultra marathon in America. Ultra marathon being anything over a typical marathon, and also just the how many local people in the community, right, do this event, do this race. It draws a lot of attention nationally too, so it's got elites and professionals that come, but also there's a lot of local runners, so it typically has about 1,000 athletes that sign up and register. The finishing rate is very high, which kind of leads into another reason that it's so popular is it's beginner friendly, and it's also a course that's manageable. I think if you Google ultra marathon and look at all these other races, right? That could be 30,000 feet of elevation gain in the mountains, and this one, although it does have trails in the beginning, it's very manageable. It's beginner friendly. You can get through this ultra marathon. So I think those are kind of part of the reasons why it's so popular. Um, if in a lot of the athletes that I talk to, whether we coach them or not, it's their first ultra that they do is JFK, and it's just got a really good reputation. I think probably because of all of those things I just mentioned, but can't emphasize enough. It's the oldest. It started in 1963, I believe. So this is year 61 of the race. So yeah, I think that's just kind of a handful of the reasons why. I'm sure others that have done it will give you their reasons, but I think those are probably the ones that are most relevant in terms of its popularity.
Cool. So what is the course like? You mentioned beginning of the trails and some other stuff, but I'd love to know, I guess, a good description of the course overall.
Okay, so the JFK 50 mile is point to point, which is also unique. Not all races, not all ultras are a point to point route. So that's a special feature of this race. And as Scott mentioned, it is a fast 50 mile, but it's also got a little bit of every element involved. So you get a little bit of mountain and trail running, but it's just a small dose up front. Then you get a little bit more runnable terrain as you work through. So it's important for listeners to know, because this is a point-to-point course, you need to think ahead about the parking situation, especially your start line parking. So the start line parking is at Boonesboro High School, but the actual start line is in downtown Boonesboro, Main Street, Boonesboro. Now, the walk from where you park to the start line is lengthy. So you need to be prepared for that. Either give yourself enough time. It's about a mile, maybe a little bit less. So it's going to take you some time to get there, or have somebody drop you off so that you can just hop right out at the start line and you don't need to walk that 1 mile all the way down from the school. So be sure you're planning ahead and giving yourself enough time to get there. Okay. From the start line, you are running from the town of Boonesboro up to the tippy top of South Mountain. Now, most of this uphill climbing is on road. You are running on a main road. There's a little 1 mile stretch of trail when you get to the top of it that's relatively flat. And then you are climbing a fire road to the very top of South Mountain. So it's about 5.5 miles to the tippy top, and that is the most climbing that you're going to do all day. Once you get up there, you are hopping onto the Appalachian Trail, and you are running down the Appalachian Trail for 12 more miles. Not quite. No, less than that. 10 more miles. Sorry. From the top of the mountain, 10 more miles down the Appalachian Trail. Now, the Appalachian Trail is rocky, rooty, technical, but it's also, the segment that you're running is relatively flat. It's not, your biggest climbs are behind you. You're going to take a big descent, and then you are going onto the C&O Canal, and this is where you're spending the majority of your day. You have just under 27 miles on the C&O Canal. Most people think of it as a marathon. It is primarily flat. We'll get into that in a minute. 27 miles straight, point to point down the canal. There's no turnarounds. There's no out and backs. You are just running straight through, and then you are going to come off the canal onto the road. The last 8 miles of the race is backcountry roads, just your perfect description of gentle rolling hills, all the way to the finish in Williamsport, Maryland. So again, point to point, you're making sort of a U or a V shape around the city of Hagerstown.
All right, cool. So I'm kind of channeling that Laura McGreen TikTok with Runnable right now, but is the Appalachian Trail runnable? And what strategies do you have for approaching that section?
I love that you said Appalachian, and I didn't. I said it Appalachian, and that's the wrong way to say it. You are correct. It's Appalachian.
Oh, I didn't even know if that was right or not. I've heard it both ways my whole life, so I just picked one.
The origin story of the trail is it is pronounced Appalachian. You are correct.
Cool.
Anyway, sorry to interrupt. No, go ahead, Scott.
So yes, the Appalachian Trail is runnable. Yes, and you should. And so I think that this is where I think some strategy comes into play. Now, should you run it? Yes, all of it. Maybe not. So it depends. It depends on how fit you are and how fast you are, right? If you're going to be running versus hiking versus walking. But for the most part, yes, it's runnable. I would say it's very technical and rocky in sections. So you want to be on the lookout. You've got to keep your guard up. You've got to keep, whether it's your eyes down on the rocks, looking in front of you, making sure that you're aware of your surroundings. At that time of year, the leaf cover is sometimes very heavy. So you can't see the rocks and the roots a lot of times on part of the trail. So again, it's really important that you keep your eyes open, kind of keep aware of your surroundings and where you are, and keep looking to make sure you know from a trail perspective what's coming up. I will say that like Lauren mentioned, there's a fire road, right? That's very steep. That's a place where you could take advantage of some power hiking, going up that, right? Because it's in the beginning of the race. Like when we say, can I run the trail section? Yes, but it's also the first, let's say 15 miles of the race. You still have 35 miles to go, right? So you also have to think strategically, based on how fit you are, like how do you want to expend that energy in the beginning, right? And so there's some power hiking that you can do. There's some walking, sure. The other thing to note too is when we talk about the trail section, most will say the trail section is from the start to Weaverton, which is 15.5 miles. That's not all trail. The first 2.5 miles, like Lauren said, is paved roads through Boonesboro till you get to the kind of almost the top of the hill. That's where the trail actually starts. Then you've got a mile of trail, which is rocky and rooty, and then you hit another 2 miles of paved fire road. Then you have, like, let's say 10 or so miles of trail. So there's really only about 11 miles of, in air quotes, trails where you've got rocks and roots and all of that to contend with. So keep that in mind. The one other thing too that I always mention when I talk about JFK is that with the amount of athletes that are running, sometimes up to 1,000, right? When you get to the trail section, and specifically mile 5.5, you get to the very, very peak. Then it really bottlenecks, and there's a section that gets really technical, but it's very narrow, and so it's a conga line. So be prepared to be stuck behind other runners, and you're almost going to be coming to a dead stop. It's happened to me when I do it every year. It's boom, you just come to a dead stop because everybody's like, oh wow, here's the trail, right? It's technical, it's rocky, I got to slow down a little bit. So that's going to happen. But ultimately, yes, pick your spots. There's going to be spots on the trail where, even though it's rocky and rooty, very runnable. I don't want to say a lot, but there's a good enough section. I think it's like 2 miles. That's somewhat downhill. It almost is actually all downhill on the trail, and that's a section where, yeah, you want to take advantage of that and do some running. But again, can't stress enough. Keep your eyes open for the rocks and the roots.
So is the fire road, is it narrow? Is it like hard to get around other runners, or is it like how many people across
It's
can you
wide.
fit on that? It's very wide. Okay.
It's wide, and it is crowded. I mean, you're running with a lot of people there, and it's crowded, but it's not narrow. It's a 2-lane kind of regular road, so it's definitely, you're not going to bottleneck there. It's once you get to the top of the fire road.
Okay. So
One
then
of the
after
tips I want to be sure to mention, Scott, as you're talking about the crowds, is because the Appalachian Trail is primarily single track. So you get into that one after the other. Conga line is what we tend to call it. One of the tips I give my athletes is if someone wants to pass you, it is their job to pass.
Yes.
It's not your job to stop and let them around you. I
Yes.
think we're very friendly in the ultra community. When you hear someone behind you, it's very common to be polite, stop, let them pass. You know they're going faster. You can lose so much time doing that with the amount of people that are up there. So run your race. If somebody wants to pass you, it is their job to find a spot that they feel comfortable moving around you. You continue moving at your own speed and feel comfortable there. It's okay to talk. It's okay to have that communication piece, but don't stop your feet for the sake of someone else to get around.
That's a very good point. Two other notes on the trail is that once you get on the trail section, there's a really big aid station at mile 9.5 or 10-ish. That's going to be the first really big aid station. There's a really small one. I think it's mile 3. It's like the 5K mark, but it's only got like water and some Gatorade. So keep that in mind too. And then lastly would be at the very end of the trail section, it's Weaverton Cliffs. And for those who are listening who know about Weaverton Cliffs, you know what I'm about ready to say, but those of you who are not, it's a series of switchbacks. It's not quite a mile. It's about 3/4 of a mile. Very steep down switchbacks. They've done some work on the trail recently where it's a little bit better than what it used to be. Very very steep, but definitely would for anybody who's not been there or listening and wonder what we're talking about. It's take your time. You know, there's going to be a conga line there, but be very patient and be very cautious with that section. There's actually volunteers, EMTs, I think, that are actually right there too to kind of help and make sure, like, if anything happens and you get injured, they'll help you. But it's very steep. I would definitely call that out. That it's a notorious section of the trail and the course.
That's a good note. Okay, I think that's it for the trail section. There's definitely a sort of a buffer period here. If I want to touch on that really quick, when you get to the bottom of Weaverton Cliffs, it's like you are a celebrity. There is a big crowd of people at Weaverton Cliffs. So when you come through there, there's music, there's cheers, it's loud, it's really uplifting, it's amazing. That is a crew checkpoint. So you are allowed to have your crew at that point on the course. It's a very common place to, pick up supplies, change shoes, that sort of thing. It's important to note when you leave that parking lot, you have another half mile or so of trail before you actually hit the canal. That little half mile of trail is very easy. It's very runnable. So just know that you've got a little bit of distance there between where you have the big crowd and when you actually hit the C&O Canal. There's also an aid station that is down there where you enter the C&O Canal. So you've got the big crowd of people. That's not your aid station. Continue going a little bit further. There's a big aid station right before you get on the C&O Canal.
Okay, cool. So then after the Appalachian Trail, you hit the C&O. And Lauren, do you want to tell us what that's like, how the surface of it, and any strategies for running that section?
Okay, so when you get on the C&O Canal, it appears flat. It is crushed gravel, which is like the teeny tiny stones, not like big gravel rocks, just so that you know. This surface is comparable to the road. It's just those tiny little rocks that can sometimes get stuck in your shoes. So it appears flat. You are running along the Potomac River, and you are following the Potomac River upstream. So when we are looking at a 27-ish mile stretch of the Appalachian or of the C&O Canal, do note that it is a moderate uphill when you look at your elevation chart at the end. You won't necessarily see it or feel it, but if you feel like maybe you're working a little bit harder than you're used to for a particular pace that you're running, a particular effort, it's not just you. There is a very mild grade to the C&O Canal. Now, it is common when you have been running on the Appalachian Trail for hours at this point, you get down onto the C&O Canal, and it's going to take your legs a minute to adjust to real running. So be aware of that too, that if you don't come off the trail and just start hitting the paces that you want to hit, that's okay. Let yourself ease into it and don't panic if it doesn't feel good right away. Give yourself a couple miles to let your body adjust to the different running terrain. Okay, so you have very frequent aid stations along this section of trail. In those 27 miles, you are getting aid stations I think the shortest distance between aid stations is 3, and I think the longest is less than 5 miles between aid stations. So you really have very frequent support when you're out there. The community really comes out as well. So there is a lot of crowd support out there, even not just at the aid stations, but in between the aid stations as well. If this is your first time running this event or it's your first 50, using those aid stations can be a really great strategy for breaking down your day. So by the time you get onto this long stretch of the C&O Canal, you've already been on your feet for 2.5, 3.5, 4, 5 hours. And this section can get really long. So it helps to break down your day, whether that's breaking it down into run walking or breaking it into your mental strategy. That a lot of the time, what I tell my athletes is that you are running from aid station to aid station. So when you get to that aid station, it's a really good time to take a walk break. Even if you don't need aid from that station, let that be your mental reminder to walk for 1 minute, maybe walk for 2 minutes, and then, kind of shake out your legs and then resume running again. For most people, a 50-mile distance is not a running only event. We walk in a 50-mile distance. So know that is very common, it is normal, and you should be planning to break down your day with run-walk intervals, at least at those aid station points. You can also have crew access at 2 points along the canal. So the Antietam Aqueduct is mile 27-ish of the total race distance. And then you have Taylor's Landing as your next crew section, which is mile 38-ish of the entire race. So those are, again, like Weaverton Cliffs, big, loud, crowded crew sections that can really boost your mood. It gives you something to look forward to. And then obviously, if you have crew, you have access to your crew at those points. So another strategy that I like to tell my athletes is to break down the canal section by those points. You starting at Weaverton Cliffs, that's your chance to shake it out, change gears, and then break it into 3 sections. You're running, it's about 10 miles to Antietam Aqueduct is your next big cruise spot. Then it's about 11 miles to Taylor's Landing, which is your last big crew access point. And then you only have about 3.5 miles until you're off the canal. And you're going to be looking forward to it by then for a little change of scenery. So if you chunk it down in your head into those 3 sections, I'm just running 10, I'm just running 11, I just have 3.5 more. That helps to make that long distance a little bit more approachable. And suddenly you find yourself at mile 42 where you exit the canal. So don't look at it as I've got 35 miles still ahead of me. I've got 27 miles on the canal. Chunk it down for yourself. And again, if this is your first 50 or your first time at this race, breaking down a run walk strategy is really the way to go. However, if you are going for a fast time, if you are really going for a specific goal on the clock, it is completely runnable. It's wide. It's probably 4 bodies across. So there's plenty of room to run. There's plenty of room to pass. And there's no technicality whatsoever, except for maybe leaves or twigs that might have come off the tree in the fall. So it is a section that you are capable of running fast if you have a time goal and are trying to get to the finish as fast as you can.
Okay, great. And then that last section is road running all the way till the end, right, Scott? So do you have strategies? Do you have strategies for this area? I'm sure there's a lot because you're probably so tired.
Yeah, it's a great feeling when you hit the road section, because not only is the canal, a little over a marathon, right? And that's you got to deal with the length of it, but it's straight. It's like you're running continuously, and the scenery, although it's great, it's the same. You got the river on the left, and you got trees on your right. When you hit that road section, it's kind of a good kind of breath of fresh air, right? Okay, I'm off the canal. I got 8-ish miles to get to the finish line. But there is a massive hill once you get off of the canal. It's I say massive. It's probably, Lauren, what, half a mile, quarter of a mile? It's not terribly
I'm going to
long.
break your heart here. It's about 200 meters.
See?
On race day, it does not feel that way.
I know.
But
exactly. Well, that just goes to show you, exactly. I mean, every time I do it,
it's steep.
It's got to be half a mile. It's steep. It's steep. So, but what I would say is that it's a chance to kind of gather yourself, right? Right after you get off the canal, it's almost like a hairpin turn. You kind of go right and boom, and you're right up on that hill. Gather yourself. Walk up that hill if you need to. Just kind of mentally be like, okay, I'm on the roads. Once you get to the top of that short little hill, it's rolling. It's rolling the whole way in. So you're not going to have any massive hills. You're not really going to have any, massive downs. A lot of aid station support. I mean, by then I think it comes every 2 miles that there's aid stations. It's open, right? And the one thing that I always tell athletes is, like, you've been on the canal. It's kind of like tree covered, even though the leaves are gone. You get out there and it's wide open. Like, okay, it's a breath of fresh air. You're kind of, the scenery's nice. You're running, backcountry roads. Again, there's going to be a lot of support. There's going to be a lot of aid stations. What I will say is that if you get to the end of the canal right before the road at a certain time, or not get there by a time, you'll be given a reflective vest to run, because by that point, the sun's gonna almost be going down. So you may be on that road section for a couple of miles in the dark. And that's,
I believe it's 2:30 p.m. is the cutoff. If you are trying to avoid a reflective vest, at 2:30 p.m. is the cutoff to start handing those out.
Yeah, and the thing with the road section is that's obviously for everybody's safety. The road is not completely, blocked off. So there's still going to be traffic on there. It's not that much, but there's still going to be some traffic on there. There's tons of support and volunteers out there, but I would say, that's a chance for you to really do some running again. And to Lauren's point, there's going to be some run walk possibly, but you're almost done. You got 8 miles, 8-ish miles, and that feeling when you get to mile 49, 48.5, and you kind of see the highway, and then you go underneath of it into the town of Williamsport. It's a great feeling. That's when kind of you just like take it all in, and you'll probably get a little boost of energy and kind of run to the finish. But yeah, and then the last section, of the race to the finish line is downhill. It's a downhill, maybe that might be a quarter mile, I think, of downhill, and you can kind of see the end. You can see the finish line and the spectators and the cheering, and it's fantastic. So, yeah. But again, I would summarize it just rolling hills. It's going to be a welcome sight. Lots of support towards the end.
There's a couple special features on this section that I think are helpful to look forward to even if it's not your first time. On the road section, you get mile markers for the first time. I don't think we mentioned that there's no mile markers on the course prior to that on the trail or on the C&O Canal. When you get on the road section, there are mile markers, but they are counting down. And that is rewarding. I think a lot of people look forward to that. The first mile marker you see at the top of that hill is 8, and then you're counting down from that point. There's also a couple aid stations that have special things along that road. At the mile 6, so that's 6 miles to go aid station, they always have warm mashed potatoes, like in a cup, that you can take with you. So if you are cold and you're needing like something heartier in your system, that's a tradition at that aid station to look forward to. At mile 4, when you have 4 miles to go, Fireball is the little, travel shots, whatever. Keep your eyes open for those. Those are typically at the mile 4 aid station. And then one that I didn't mention along the C&O Canal, but this is also a really special one. It's not quite 20, it's mile 19 and change. The Frederick Steeplechasers aid station. They always have cookies, and this is not just a cookie. This is a beautifully designed sugar cookie with the icing has been it's a work of art. It is detailed and colorful and beautiful, and they do something unique every single year. So even if you don't want a cookie, take one and put it in your pack for later, because those are a real special feature that you should look for out there. So that's 20, right about mile 20. It's your first aid station on the canal. And then I always kind of tell people, when you're on that road section, you're working toward the finish, when you can hear the noise of the highway, you're getting close. You're almost there. And, obviously, when you take that turn toward the final mile, it's very clear that you're almost there. But you can be running those gentle rolling country roads and feel like it's not coming. It's not coming. So when you hear the highway, you're getting close. You're very near that last mile. Okay, so at this point, we are going to pause our information session and take you to our first athlete interview. So this interview is with Devon Yanko. She is a professional runner for Lululemon, and she is sharing her experiences at the JFK 50 mile, as well as tips and tricks and her viewpoint of insider info for how she runs this race and also how you can run your best JFK 50. Here's Devon. Hey there, I am here with Devon Yanko. Devon is the 2009 women's champion of the JFK 50 mile, as well as the 2021 third place female at the JFK 50 mile. Devon, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk about one of my favorite races.
Oh, I love hearing you say that. It's one of my favorite races too. So the first question I have for you, you are based in Colorado and you were on the West Coast before that. What drew you out to JFK here in Maryland on the East Coast from the other side of the country?
Yeah, I mean, as you said, I've been doing this for a really, really long time. And, back when I first started ultra running, I did my first ultra in 2006. JFK was one of the iconic races that everybody did. I was right around the time period. I set the course record in 2009. And at the time, Mike Spindler, right? The race director was like, I think this is going to stand for a really long time. And 3 years later, Ellie Greenwood and Emily Torrance smashed just annihilated my time. And it was but that was the state of things in that time period where it was Ellie, I think that was the same year Ellie won Western States, right? So we were doing everything. And so for me, as somebody who was running trail, running road, I had been on at that point I had been on 300K road teams. I was like, I like to run. And I was like, I love trail too, but I was so intrigued by the combination, and like, I knew it was a fast course. And so I just felt like it played to my strengths. And so, iconic race plays to my strengths. It was like a cool combination. And I just went out there in 2009, I had like a really great day where it just felt effortless.
So that maybe leads to my next question. Maybe it answers my next question. So we know the race is sort of like 3 segments, right? We've got the trail section, you've got the canal section, and then that little bit of road at the end. What is your favorite section of the race?
I mean, I like all of the pieces for different reasons, but like the canal section for me is like just where I kind of get in my groove, right? Like I would say, like, in terms of my speed, like to be able to just like, I can get on there and I have the durability to just like throw down a really fast marathon and like be really consistent. And other than the fact that at least in 2021, I didn't appreciate as much that it's slightly uphill the whole way. Like I just love like I love when I can get in a rhythm, and like you can do that on that section. And then, when you get on the hills at the end, you're just like, I'm going to do whatever I can. So
Yeah. It feels kind of good to get on the hills at the end, I think, after that flat.
Yeah.
You make a good point, though. Listeners should know you can't tell when you're on the canal. It feels like it's flat, but when you look at your data chart after, it's definitely a continuous, long, slow, gradual hill.
And that's the thing, I think, when you're feeling like this is hard, it's flat by ultra running standards or whatever, but like it's still going to feel harder than true flat would. And like when you're questioning your life choices, you have to remember like this is going to feel slightly harder than like a true flat. And even if you can't, it's like imperceptible, like you are putting more effort to kind of run the same speed.
Yeah, that's good perspective. So what, if that's your favorite section, what's your least favorite section if you had to pick one?
I don't dislike any part. There's like a part of the trail at the beginning, like there's like a really steep road part. Like you run the first road and you're like, fine. And you're also going, why are people running so fast? Because that's ridiculous. But you kind of like climb up and there's a descent followed by like a really steep road. And I just hate that road because you're like, it's a road. I should be able to run it. But it's like so steep. You're like, I feel like I'm race walking up this hill.
Yes, that's my least favorite section too. And people should know that also. There are a couple sections of that road that I just describe them as stupid. It's so steep.
They're
when it feels like you should be walking, maybe you should.
Yeah. And I tend to get a little judgy
funny.
Because I will walk them and then I'm like, why are they running? And I'm like, I need to stop being myself sometimes. It's fine.
It's a bad place to compare yourself.
Yeah.
And that's mile 4, I think. 4 or 5, somewhere in there. Okay, so this is a race that has a lot of mixed terrain. We start on the road, we get on the Appalachian Trail, which is known for being rocky, technical, and then you get onto the canal, which is nice and crushed gravel. So when you have run the race, and now you've done it twice, so maybe you've done it differently, do you change shoes? Do you wear a trail shoe on the trail and then change when you get off the trail?
Yeah, so in 2009, that was not a thing that people did because there was no real, like, so in 2009, I wore a road shoe for the whole thing. I will say both years that I've done it, the weather has been like not wet, not like pretty mild. I think if I look back at the pictures in 2009, it might have been colder than this last time, but like, so I wore road shoes for the whole thing in 2009. The last time I ran it, super shoes are a thing now. I was sponsored at the time. I'm going to take free money where I can. And like, from my perspective, the time that you lose by sitting down and changing your shoes is made up for the fact that you're getting, if you are responsive to something like super shoes, then it might make sense to like, those do help save your legs. And like, I put I just remember when I put the shoes on in 2021, I was like, oh my gosh, that feels so different than this real shit. Like, you would feel like you're like bling, bling, bling. I like bounded out of the aid station. And so it just gave me almost like I think it's, if nothing else, it's a great mental break too, to be like, I am done with that. Like, this is a new thing. So I think it's pretty common now. And for most people, I think there is a benefit, just because, like, especially if you're uncomfortable, like, I'm the type of I have run one of the most technical 100Ks of my whole career, the Ultra Trail Cape Town. I ran those in road shoes because at the time I was sponsored by a company that I could only wear their road shoes. And like, so I can run crazy technical things and still not die, which was the metric in that race. So I have a level of comfort wearing road shoes on trail, but if you're even slightly like self-conscious about your footing or like the leaves or whatever else, just having like a really grippy sole or like just what makes you feel comfortable on the trail, I think it's worth doing versus like the time savings or whatever, right? Like, you're not saving any time if you fall down 50 times. Although Sarah Biel can do that.
That's a good person.
She fell down so many times when she won in 2021, and I kept picking her up, and I was like, finally I was like, I need to get away from you because I'm losing time because I just keep picking you off the ground.
Oh, that's so funny. And then she came back and broke the course record the following year.
Yeah, exactly.
She practiced.
Oh,
that's funny. I really like that perspective too, of when you get off the trail to have that transition moment. Like, I think a lot of people, because the trail takes so long, it's only, I think 15 and a half miles by the time you get off it, but it's been several hours. Maybe you don't usually take that many hours to run 15 miles. So having that, like, to kind of like refresh yourself and reset your intention of, okay, it's different now.
Yeah.
I like that. That's good
and
advice.
Like, it's a nice time. I mean, if you have crew and stuff, like, it also is just like, you can like take your time, do everything you need. Like, there's no benefit to rushing through that particular juncture.
So you completely answered my next question. Do you use crew or do you use aid stations, or have you ever done it without crew? I guess maybe would be my question now.
Well, technically neither time I actually had my own crew. So what happened, so in 2009, no crew. I used aid stations and drop bags. Actually, I don't even know if I had drop bags. I probably just carried everything that
They don't do drop bags.
Yeah, they don't do drop bags. So I must have just carried everything. And to be fair, I mean, when you're running 6.5 hours, like, the number of gels that I carried was, it's not, I'm not carrying like 3,000 calories or something. So in 2021, the only reason I had crew was because the coaching collective that I'm a part of, one of the guy who founded it, one of his athletes was running. And so that kid, he was a kid, 20 years old or something, his dad said he'd help me out as long as I was like in range of his son, like, it was like, as long as you're like, I will just leave your shoes on the side here or whatever. So I only had crew at that coming off the trail. And all I did was change my shoes and take a handful of gels. And then the rest of the time, and actually, I think this is a really good point about having crew. So in that race, I was really in the mix with a lot of women for a long time. And we would come into aid stations that had crew, and I would put a significant amount of time on them every time we went through an aid station, even though I was helping myself, right? Because they would get surrounded and like, they would be with their crew, and I would just be like, all I am here for is to fill up my water bottle. And I would just come in like I'm unscrewing, they would, and I would go, I mean, I made a hand gesture and we're on a podcast, but whatever. But like, that's the thing I think people need to be cognizant about. If you were utilizing crew, you should be still trying to be as efficient as possible, because even though there's not like a ton of places you can have crew, like, that time adds up. If every time you're sitting down and being like, maybe I'll change my socks, maybe I'll have a do, like, I tell a lot of my athletes, if you're going to have a cry, you can have a walk and a cry. Like if you need to drink a Coke, have a walk and a Coke. Like a lot of things in an aid station, you don't necessarily need to come to a complete stop for. So it's like, if you use crew, just be really cognizant of like the amount of time that you take while using, like, don't rush. You don't need to rush, but like, you also don't need to have a 15-minute conversation about the parking situation with them or something, whatever, how their drive was. Right. And so the answer, like, I basically didn't have crew, and in a race like that, which has really great aid stations, like, I don't think we need to have crew just to have crew.
It's you can do it on your own. You can do it. Self-supported is the wrong word, but aid station supported. You can do it really well.
Yeah. And I think that's just a matter of like, if you're newer to the sport or like, I think a lot of times we get wrapped up in like, but I need my thing. And it's like, that's a great reason to go to the website and consult, like, what does this aid station have? And like, if it's not your drink, right? Like it's not goo, it's Morton, or Morton, not goo, or I mean, Grindstone recently, they had knock, and I was like, I don't even know what this is, but put it in my bottle. If you have an opportunity to then be like, oh, this race I'm planning for is going to have this, maybe I train with it so I don't have to fly my mom across the country to help me out, or, like, there's just, you can kind of plan for those things and then be able to better support yourself. Like, I love seeing some family and, getting kisses from my husband and all that during a race. But like, I think it's like making sure that it's like as distraction free as possible. And like, I think everybody in the race from the front to the back can like be really efficient, and that can help them have like a better day. And like, I look at my athletes, like in a 100-miler, I like go back and be like, we could have gotten back 4 hours during that 100 if you just, I don't know, didn't take so it's just thinking those things through in advance, I think is really helpful.
Yeah. And keep moving. I like that. That's great advice. How about carrying a pack versus carrying a bottle? And which one do you do, or do you do both and change and drop something at some point?
I mean, I'm notoriously a camel, and like, I don't, like, in a race like a 50-miler, I kind of run towards the like lower end of the range of like I'm not worried that I can't make it like 6.5 hours on like 150 calories an hour or whatever, like I personally, because of the gamble of like speed, I tend to wear, like, I think both times I wore a waist pack and I had like a soft flask. The aid stations are generally close enough together that like, that's not problematic for me. And it's because most years are so cool that I'm not worried. Like, I just fill up at every aid station. And it's just makes that really efficient for me, because I'm not carrying, like, I don't like packs. And so I just kind of have what I need in my waist pack and then a handheld. It just works for me. I think that's a personal preference. Some people like packs. Some people, as you like kind of expand to different parts of the pack, like depending on if you are going to be out there, it like if this space between aid stations is, I guess, a longer amount of time, you might need 2 bottles. And so it's like, what's going to make you feel comfortable and that you can stay on plan, right? So it's like, if you look at your plan for your splits and say, hey, this is going to take me 2 hours to make it from aid station A to aid station B, then you will want to plan according to that. And not plan according to like some pie in the sky best case scenario in which you suddenly outperform yourself by 1,000%.
Right. Man, that's all really good advice. I love Thank you. This is all good insight. Okay, so one last question. Do you ever want to come back to our little race in Hagerstown, Maryland?
I mean, I do. I don't think I have nailed it as like, I feel like I could run. I don't know at this point if I could run. Like, I'd have to have like a super perfect day to break the course record now. But given 2021, I was coming off of having back-to-back stress fractures. So I was like, that was my only race of the year. And like my fitness was not that good. And like 2009, I was just younger and had a lot less years under me. So like, I would just be curious if given my skill set and like I live at altitude now, and if I could put together a better day. So, I mean, and to be fair, I have been signed up for the race at least like 6 other times. And it's just been kind of one of those things where like, I've also been signed up for comrades every year since 2012. And it just is like, can I make it work? Can I not? And like, so yes, I would totally come back.
I think listeners should know that from 2009, when she was 20 something, to 2021, when she was 39, Devon ran almost the same exact time, 6:29 to compared to a 6:31, like 2 minutes off, and coming off of, some injuries and a bumpy cycle. I think that's incredible. And as a fan of the sport, it would be awesome to see you back at JFK someday. So I hope that you do. I'll be checking for your name on the registration and hope that you make it that year. So awesome. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate all of your insight and feedback, and I think this has been really helpful. I'm excited to share it.
Yeah, it's a great race, and I hope everybody who's out there this year has a awesome time.
Awesome. Thank you, Devon. Have a good night.
You too.
All right, and we're back. So we covered the course pretty thoroughly in the first section of our podcast. The second half of the episode here is going to be about strategy and the technicality of running this race.
All right. So Lauren, earlier I heard you mention shoe changes at Weaverton. So I'm just curious, do you recommend anyone use road shoes, trail shoes, both, hiking boots? What kind of footwear do you recommend for this race?
So there's a couple aspects to consider on what kind of shoe you're going to run in. The first thing you need to consider is, do you have crew or support or do you not? Because this race does not offer drop bags. So if you do not have crew support, you are going to need to run in the same pair of shoes the whole way. It's not a choice, unless you're carrying the extra pair of shoes on the person. So think about that up front. The best piece of advice is if you are running in one shoe all day, it is to choose the shoe that is the most comfortable on your feet. You can run the Appalachian Trail in road shoes. You can run the C&O Canal in trail shoes. So the key advice, if you are going with one pair of shoes for the whole day, is choose what's most comfortable on your feet, because you're going to be wearing them for a long time. Now, looking at if you have the option of changing shoes, again, there's a couple factors to consider here. So the trail section, if it is a dry day, the trail section is quite runnable in a road shoe. You do not need a trail shoe. It is rocky, but the rocks are large enough for your foot. You're not looking at loose rock or gravel that's slippery unless it's wet. If it's wet, you might want a little bit of tread on the bottom of your shoe. You might want something a little more grippy. Or if you are really trying to run quickly, if you have a time goal, you're trying to cover the trail as fast as you can, something that's got a rock plate that you can really run over the rocks a little bit more efficiently is going to be to your benefit. Now, when it comes to changing shoes, again, comfort is the key. If you are planning to change shoes, you get off the trail and find that you are quite comfy and happy, you don't have to change. That's okay. Stick with what you are already in. Now, the benefit, if you did run the canal in a trail shoe, The benefit of changing to a road shoe is that road shoes are typically lighter. So you are taking a heavier shoe off your feet, putting something lighter on your feet. And that is a really nice feeling for the transition. And also just because you do have 35 miles still ahead of you, that's going to pay off across the board. The other thing to consider is super shoes are a thing now. And the C&O Canal and the road section are friendly to super shoes. I wouldn't necessarily recommend you wear a road super shoe on the trail. I think that's a bad choice. But changing into a super shoe, whether or not it's necessarily making you faster, because you are on a gravel surface on the C&O Canal, you're losing a little bit of the benefit of what a super shoe would offer you on the road. But you have that additional level of cushion. It is going to save your energy output, save your body a little bit over, again, like we said, 35 miles by the time you change or by the time you get off the trail. Another thing to consider just based on your crew situation is that you can always change your mind. So if you are someone who has crew available, has the option to change shoes, if you get down off the trail and you are comfortable and happy, keep on the shoes that you have. You always have the option at one of the next two big crew checkpoints to change your shoes then. Or change back if you find that you're not happy in whatever you changed into. So keep your options open. But I think there's advantages and disadvantages to both, but you can definitely run this race in one shoe. A shoe change is not required.
Okay, got it. All right, so Scott, let's talk about what you carry on you. Do you prefer having like a hydration pack to carry lots of gear in, or a handheld water bottle to be as light as possible? Like how do you outfit yourself to carry what you need?
Yeah, so whatever you've trained with, my recommendation would be go with that, right? So if you're an athlete that you're more comfortable in a hydration vest, go with that. If you're more comfortable with handhelds, go with that. You can't go wrong with either. And there's actually a third option that some athletes have. There's the belts like that you can they have pockets that you can stuff things in. I've seen a lot of athletes have the flasks, the kind of, I don't know what material they're made of, but they kind of like soft flasks, and you can shove a couple in there, right? So then you don't have to have a pack or handhelds. You can't go wrong with it with any of them. Whatever you've trained in, especially trained your long runs in, is going to bring you the most comfort. My recommendation would go with that. I do talk to a lot of athletes who sometimes are worried, they're not going to be able to carry enough fluids, right? There's like, well, maybe I'll have both. Maybe I'll have a pack and two handhelds. Is that okay? Know that there's going to be places and aid stations along the course where you can refuel and fill up with fluids. When we talk about fluids, so I wouldn't necessarily be concerned that you're going to run out of fluids that you're carrying. You also have to keep in mind where you're going to store your gels or your solids, your foods that you're going to take with you as well. So all of those things are things to keep in mind. If you're somebody that only likes handhelds, you got to have something to carry your gels in or whatever you're going to be additional fuel in as well. So that's where belts sometimes are very popular. Some of the shorts now actually have built-in pockets that you can put in, but can't go wrong with any of them. But my biggest advice would be what you've trained your long runs in, stick to that. But also put a little bit of strategy into it too, in terms of, from a fueling standpoint, it's more than just hydration. How many gels, how many things do you need to get in your calories per hour per whatever segment. So you're going to be wanting to store those things. But that would be my advice in terms of just the vest versus the pack. There's a host of other things that you can be carrying as well. But if we're talking about the hydration, the vest, the pack, that'd be my thoughts.
If I can offer an opinion here, something that I have seen frequently on the trail section in particular, because it is technical, regardless of your comfort level on the trail, but especially if you are uncomfortable on the trail, it is very common that athletes forget to fuel and forget to hydrate because they're so focused on the trail in front of them. What I have seen be really helpful, if you know that that's you, who tends to get very focused and isn't able to lift their eyes off the trail or lift their head off the trail. If you are carrying a hard bottle, that's how you drink it. You have to tilt your on a podcast, on the video episode, you have to tilt your chin up to take a drink of a water bottle. So there is a benefit on the trail section specifically. It doesn't necessarily have to be a pack. If you're not comfortable with a pack, don't put on something you're uncomfortable with. But if you have a pack with a hose that you can just put in your mouth without having to move your head or take your eyes off the trail, that can help you stay a little bit more consistent with your hydration and your fueling on that technical section. It can also be a soft flask bottle, like Scott mentioned. A soft flask is exactly what it sounds like. It's soft. You squish it. So you can take a drink while squeezing it into your mouth as opposed to having to tip your head back and take your eyes off the trail. So again, no wrong answer with the pack or the bottle, but something to consider for that technical section is something that allows you to drink without being distracted from the technical terrain that you're running on.
Yep, so, great advice.
Is there I've heard that trail runners will also use handhelds in each hand to break falls. Is that something you recommend for people who are less experienced or not?
No, I've broken falls with many a handhelds before, but I wouldn't recommend it as necessarily a strategy. I think
as a safety.
Yeah, I mean, if you're worried about the terrain and everything, sometimes I feel like the handhelds are maybe more of a distraction, right? If you're running and the more you have your hands free and that's when you, like to Lauren's point, you have a hose, right? You're putting more emphasis and mental focus on the trail itself, right? So, but no, I wouldn't necessarily say that that's a good strategy per se.
Okay.
And I think there's a good chance you'll break your bottle also.
Yes.
So if that's what you're depending on for the day, you're going to be in trouble. I'll also say to that point, when you're trail running, especially on technical terrain, you tend to lift your arms to help you balance. You don't run like you would fluidly run on the road. You're doing a lot more airplane arms as you run the trail. If you've got 2 full water bottles in your hand, that can actually tax a lot of energy. So that's a benefit of going hands-free, is having your hands free for the purpose of balance. But, again, 2 small bottles, if they're not really a lot of weight on you, like 2 8 to 10 ounce bottles in each hand, that's not going to be as much of an issue for energy expenditure.
Gotcha. And do you all recommend any clothing changes at all during the race? Is that like another, it depends?
Well, that's where I think taking advantage of, if you have crew or somebody that's going to be at the 3 major places we mentioned, like Weaverton Cliffs, mile 15 and a half-ish, 27 at Antietam, and 38 at Taylor's Landing. That's a spot where maybe if you're comfortable, if you're somebody that wants a dry shirt or a dry pair of socks, sure, those are places to do it. Again, your comfort level. I think sometimes if an athlete changes socks and shoes and then puts their shoes back on, it's like, oh, I'm putting my shoes back on, right? So a lot of athletes just like to just go, right, what they have on and they start with. It's also going to be something where you want to look at the weather forecast, right? If you see that the forecast is calling for rain, maybe that's something where you want maybe a change or a dry pair. But that's also too where maybe a hydration pack comes in handy, right? If it's going to be a wet day, you can kind of stuff. Most of them have bigger pockets where you can have, like, let's say a windbreaker or a rain jacket on, and then it gets warm and you warm up, take it off, shove it in the back of your pack, right? So wearing a hydration vest also comes with a little bit more diversity in terms of just carrying other things like a dry shirt or a jacket or something. But again, personal preference. But yeah.
So I think I would recommend in the first 5 miles, when we talked about the course description, you are running uphill almost continuously for those first 5 miles. You're going to get warm pretty quickly, even if it's a cold day. However, when you get to the top of the mountain and you enter the trail, you start moving quite a bit slower and you're moving downhill. And you tend to... the majority of people are going to do a little bit more walk time on that section as well. So you're warming your body up quickly, and then it's going to cool down on the trail. So my advice would be to wear a layer. Wear on your bottoms what you're going to be comfortable through the thick of the day. So when you're looking at the temperature for the day, look at what the bulk of the day is going to be, and wear a bottom that suits that, even if you're a little bit cold in the beginning. Wear something on top that's layered so that you have the option to take it off if you do get warm, but you've got that extra layer of insulation if you need it when you're on the trail section specifically. So a lot of races, I might recommend someone wears throwaway clothes to the start line. And then when it's time to start, you take all of that off and you're traveling as light as you can. In this race, I wouldn't necessarily recommend that. Throwaway clothes can still be helpful for the standing around period, but I would still dress to plan to be a little bit chilly during the trail section. Even if you feel warm in the first couple miles going uphill, you're going to cool down a little bit. Yeah, that's a good question.
Okay, awesome. So we brought up crews a few times throughout this episode. Do you need a crew? And like, why do you need a crew? Or is it not as beneficial to you as some may think? And also pacers. Like, can you have someone run with you for a section of the race?
Okay, I'll answer the pacer question first because that's easy. No, you can't. You used to. The JFK 50 used to allow pacers. As recently as maybe 7 or 8 years ago, they no longer do. So there are no pacers allowed in this race. You are on your own. But again, this is a really big race. There are going to be people around you most of the day. So just know that you are never truly very alone in this race, whether it's with other runners or with the spectators in the community. Like we said in the beginning, the community comes out in a big way for this race. So there's not a whole lot of alone time regardless. Okay, crew though, there's a lot to consider there. So I think I'll start first and say absolutely not. You do not need a crew to run 50 miles periods. This race specifically is so well supported. You will be in great shape if you do not have a crew. The biggest difference is the ability to change your shoes, like we talked about a little while ago, because there are no drop bags. So that's not an option you have if you don't have a crew. The other thing is how much you need to carry. So if you have a specific fuel product, and I'm going to say nutrition specifically, not hydration so much, that you know that you like to use, you're going to need to carry all of that to get you from the start line through the finish line. However, there are so many aid stations in this race. I compare it to someone who's coming from a road running background and maybe coming into their first 50. You have aid stations almost as frequently as you would see in a road race. So you really are very well supported in terms of, we were talking about carrying a pack or carrying a bottle, especially when you get down onto the canal section and you have aid stations every 3 to 5 miles, you really can travel light. You're going to be able to refill your bottle whenever you want. These aid stations are so well stocked. They really take pride. It's a specific organization that mans each aid station every year. And it is like a tradition for that organization to have their special thing or the things that they provide. So you're not just seeing like a couple orange slices and a cooler on the table. You have a buffet of options at every aid station. So in terms of your whole food choices, in terms of filling up your bottles or your hydration pack, you are very well supported by the race and by the community. You do not need a crew. However, a crew can be nice when you are running 50 miles. I think, to be honest, the biggest benefit is getting to see people, getting to see your people, somebody that you care about, someone who supports you is coming out to spend their day for you. I think is really motivating and uplifting. It gives you something to look forward to. You know, so-and-so is going to be at this point. And you know, they sacrificed their day to be out there for you. So you better get there. So from the motivational, inspirational standpoint, I think it is a big benefit just to have that personal boost. And then, like I mentioned with the aid stations, you can travel a lot lighter if you have a crew. You have 3 main points that your crew is allowed to access. That's at the end of the trail, mile 27, mile 38-ish, and then that's it to the finish. So you can really when you get to the end of the trail section, you have the option to change your shoes. You have the option to drop. If you carried a pack and you want to go lighter, you can drop your pack and pick up a bottle. That's a really common strategy to lighten up when you get down to the canal section. You can change your clothes if you want to, or drop a layer if you're really getting warm and you know it's going to stay warm. And then you only need to carry enough of, again, if it's your special fuel, you only need to carry enough to get you 10 more miles to the next spot that you're going to see your crew. Then you only need to carry enough for 11 more miles. So you can get away with, maybe 2 or 3 gels in your pocket, as opposed to needing to carry 50 miles worth of gels in your pack. So the disadvantage of having a crew is time wasted. And this is something to be cognizant of as you're coming through those aid stations. Like I mentioned, it is a real moral boost to see your people at those aid stations. It is real easy to waste time with your people, though, and start, chit-chatting, telling them all about the section that you just ran, asking how their morning has been. That's save it for the finish line. You can break down every aspect of your race when you are done. So when you get to those crew-specific aid stations, you don't need to hurry or rush, but you do need to move through. So, always be polite, to be friendly to your crew. Make sure you thank them for being there. Give them a hug, and then keep on moving. Don't spend 10, 15, 20 minutes hanging out with your people. That's probably the only true detriment that I tend to see in having a crew on the course is wasted time. So just know they're going to be there at the finish line for you too, and you can recap your whole day then.
All right. So talk about crew and all the items you can carry. Is anything not allowed on the course? Like, is there anything you should just not pack? Or is there something that you should just 100% pack no matter what?
Headphones are not allowed. So, and you'll see that in the race briefing and the emails and all that information that comes out. Headphones are not allowed. So that's one that's not allowed.
They're serious about that too, folks.
Yeah.
I know, just if you've not been here before, a lot of times we see that in the runner packet that you're not supposed to wear headphones. We don't recommend you wear headphones. You may not wear headphones in this race, and you risk being disqualified if you do.
Yeah. Very important. What I would say, aside from just your running shoes and the clothes that you wear, right? Like the essentials that you need, I would almost phrase this as what you should pack, right? To take with you to the race, and then going back to the whole point of crew, right? It's a whole lot easier if you have a crew that can meet you at certain spots to give you items that you may not need right in the beginning of the race versus the middle or the end. Some things to keep in mind is it is a GPS. They do offer GPS timing. You don't have to take advantage of it. But if you do want to take advantage of the GPS tracking, it's on your phone. You have to use your phone, and that may burn your battery really quickly. So keep in mind that the GPS is great because it tells your crew, if you have a crew, or other people that are at home, where you're at. They can kind of see you and track you. Also keep in mind that there's really not great cell service up on the trail, and even on parts of the C&O Canal, there's not great cell service. So not only is the GPS tracking going to be burning your battery, you're just going to be burning battery in general. So keep that in mind if you are thinking about taking advantage of the tracking or just taking your phone in general. Keep that in mind. I've seen some athletes that'll take like a little portable battery charger. They'll charge it up the night before, so then in case their cell phone does die, they have that. Now you got to have a little cord to go with it too. So keep that in mind. Another tip that I always say is maybe a little a baggie, right? Because if it's rainy or wet and you're sweating, you can put your phone in there. You can put some other items in the baggie. I would say that the one thing, even though there's not drop bags, you are allowed to leave a bag at the starting line. There's a truck that you can put a bag at the starting line with your name on it and your race number, so that when you're at the finish line, you can have like a bag with a dry set of clothes. And that I think is really key, because that's a question I get a lot is, at the end, like it's a point to point, so you're not going all the way back to the start. How do I change this? So there's one thing to keep in mind too, is especially if you don't have a crew, is you can leave a bag at the start. That bag will be there at the finish line, and that can be your dry set of clothes, et cetera, et cetera. And keep that in mind if you're thinking that you want to carry an extra shirt or a hat because at the end, you want to have some dry stuff. That's an option that you can take advantage of.
I just want to
Headphones.
say something with the
Yeah.
GPS too. As
Yeah.
someone who's crewed, I've never run it, but I have crewed the race. Print the directions out and the GPS coordinates out before you leave your house, because your GPS will not work out there with no cell phone. So just if you're a runner listening to this, give your crew like GPS coordinates, print out directions on old school MapQuest or Google Maps, and print it to make sure they know where they're going, because that was super useful to have as a crew member.
Yeah. Good point.
That's a great point. Those two on the canal, it's the Antietam Aqueduct and the Taylor's Landing. Both of those two big crew access points are notorious for having no signal for most people. That's a great point.
Yeah, and just if you're meeting other crew members, decide ahead of time exactly where you're parking and meeting up, because you can't call anyone. You're MIA for hours on end. So
yeah, and a lot of this honestly is just about comfort too, right? I mean, you're going to be out there it's going to be a long day, so you want to be comfortable. What I always say is if you're cold, like it's going to be cold in the morning, but if you're somebody that typically gets cold, wear some gloves, wear a hat, right? You want to be comfortable. You're gonna warm up, as Lauren said, but you want to be comfortable too. So again, I keep going back to if you have a crew, right? So understand that you can shed some layers, you can shed some stuff that maybe if you went a little heavy on the layers, you can shed that at the mile 15 ish or so. Spot. So that's what I would say. I mean, from an essential standpoint, I think I would kind of wrap this up with maybe that's some tips that maybe to think about as you head into your planning of the race.
The one thing I would add there is a headlamp, and I want to differentiate at the start, because it is dark while they are staging the race for the start. And you might think you need a headlamp for the start, but I promise you that you don't. By the time the gun goes off, the first mile is well lit through downtown Boonesboro, and the sun is not coming up, but it is light in the sky. You do not need a headlamp for the beginning of this race, but you're going to disagree with me when you're standing on the start line at 6:15, 15 minutes to go time. But you do want to consider a headlamp for the end of the race. If you are someone who's looking at 10 to 10 and a half hours or over, that's when you're getting into sunset and when you are likely to find yourself running in the dark. I think Scott mentioned earlier in the episode that there's a lot of people out on the road section. And so you don't necessarily need a headlamp. You will be able to see reasonably well. But for your comfort, and if you want to make sure that you can see really well, a headlamp would be a good idea, either to throw in your pack or to pick up from your crew along the way. Again, it's that 10 to 10 and a half hours and over that you are starting to get dark in the last section.
Okay. Great.
Oh, you know what? I forgot. I'm glad I wrote it down on my little list here. Anti-chafe. Be sure that you are packing the anti-chafe. I think, especially if this is your first 50 or your first ultra, again, it's a little different than a marathon or even a 50K in that you're going to really be out there for the day. This is a day-long event. Even, in 8 hours, that's a work day. That's a day in the office. So either carry with you or have your crew have anti-chafe that you can reapply, because you might need to reapply over the course of a 7 to 13 hour day on your feet.
Okay. So, we've done a lot with this race. More Miles has a long history with JFK. Can you kind of go through, I guess, all of our connections to this race, if you don't mind?
Yeah. So More Miles Run Coaching, again, is based in Hagerstown, Maryland, which is the home of the JFK 50. So these are our backyard trails. We run them regularly. It's our hometown. So we're very proud of this race. We have been coaching athletes through this race for this will be our 7th year of coaching athletes coming up. So 6 years under our belt, about to be 7. And in that time, we've coached over 80 athletes through this race specifically. So it's very near and dear to us. Scott has run this race 7 times himself. I have run it 3, about to be 4. When we are not running, we are out there crewing and cheering because it's just a special event to us as well. as coaches, every year the More Miles team we have sort of our own little crew that at least at one point on the trail, at that critical getting off the trail section, we offer ourselves up as crew. So if you are one of our athletes who doesn't have family or friends or something nearby, you have your coaches to depend on and your team. So we are always supporting our athletes specifically in this event, as well as cheering on everybody out there. So when you get down to the train tracks, right where you're entering the canal, there's a notorious, sometimes a train will come past and you have to wait. That's where you'll see the More Miles Run Squad team. So we'll be sure to cheer for you. Be sure to wave at us. Yeah, we also offer leading up to the race. So we offer one-on-one coaching. It's not a group coaching program. We coach each athlete individually, specific to their fitness, specific to their schedule, specific to their goals. However, throughout the training block, we offer group training runs throughout the training season. So we will meet together to tour guide the trail if you're someone who's never been up there and doesn't know where to go or maybe isn't comfortable on trails. And in the early training season, we open those to the public. So anybody is welcome to come join us. And then later in the season, as we get closer to race day, we do point-to-point trail runs specifically for our athletes, where we are carpooling from one point, driving back to the start of the trail section, or all the way down to the start line and getting to run, full sections of the course throughout your training. So we really go all in on this race and on supporting our athletes and our team for this race. And again, because we're local, the support out there for our team that's not running are out there to cheer for you, help you, crew for you. We really take pride in the way that we do this race. Yeah. So we are going to cut now to our interview with Anthony Kunkel. Anthony is a professional runner and a 6-time JFK participant. He shares his insight on training and preparation for this race, which was particularly interesting, and also strategies, especially for racing at the front. If you are going for your fastest event this year at JFK or are looking to do your fastest event in the future, I think you'll find his interview very interesting. All right, so here's Anthony.
All right, we are here with Anthony Kungle. Anthony, how are you?
Good, man.
Good.
Got some organ meat tacos. Had a murderous session this morning for some reason, and yeah, just loving life. Another sunshiny day here.
I was just about ready to ask. You beat me to it. Sunshiny day. We're in the middle of a tropical storm out on the East Coast, so we've got opposite weather. But yeah. So having a good weekend.
Yeah, I think it was like the hardest session of the training block this morning for, I don't know, I would assert no reason, but it's probably just, it'll be more miles than I've had in quite a few months crammed into a week, plus a lot of, like, I'm sleeping in the altitude tent back here. And
oh, wow.
Yeah, I'm like doing some intermittent hypoxia middle of the day, just cranking it up to like, I don't know what it is, like more than 20,000 feet, and just kind of like taking notes or reading or listening to a podcast or whatever, and getting the pulse ox down to 80 or so. And yeah, I mean, I'm definitely adding stressors, and you know me, I'm always good for 7 or more saunas out of the week. And it's hard not to just accidentally get like 12 or 15,000 feet of vert training this many miles. Just to survive in Durango, you end up with 10,000 feet of vert a week or so. So yeah, it's good, but yeah, I'm paying the piper a little bit today.
Well, this is why we wanted to talk to you. Exactly why we wanted to talk to you. So we wanted to bring on some front packers, elite runners, to talk to us about how they do it. The JFK specifically, your experience with the race, how you've kind of tackled the race. I mean, you've done it enough. But I want to take a step back and introduce everybody to you. So Anthony is an elite runner, lives in Durango, Colorado. He's done JFK 6 times, I believe, Anthony.
I've started 6 times.
Started 6 times, but that's how I met Anthony, was through social media. I was getting back into running myself, and I was jumping into JFK for my 3rd time. I had taken a very extended break from running, and I'm out there and I see this runner that I know is fast, and I'm like, there's no way that somebody loves JFK more than I love JFK. But Anthony was putting it out there that he loves JFK. So I reached out to Anthony. Anthony is very accessible. I mean, he opened up not only his his phone to me, but his house to me. So I've actually spent some time in Durango with Anthony. I've trained with Anthony, so I know this guy's legit. But Anthony, if you don't mind, I'm going to rattle off a couple of stats here just for the listeners. You finished, or you ran JFK 6 times. You finished second. You finished third. You finished fourth. You've run 5:40 at JFK. I mean, we're talking fast, on that course. You've represented USA twice from a road perspective in the ultra.
Just the once.
Just the once. Okay.
100K.
But you've been the national champ in the 50 mile and 100K. Is that right?
Yeah. That was both vying for the same Team USA slot.
Got it. So Anthony is the real deal. So again, we wanted really just to talk to you about a couple of things. And first and foremost, I guess the first question I have for you is, how did you find out about JFK? I know you're from the Midwest and you live in Durango now, this being an East Coast race. Tell me your story. How did you hear about JFK?
Oh man, I'm not even sure the first time. I was probably 15 or 16 and probably read about it in an ultra running magazine. I mean, it's definitely, if we want to call it exactly 50 miles and we want to split hairs between like comrades, for example, then we would say JFK is the most prestigious 50-mile race in the world. I mean, it's a huge freaking deal. And so the first time I went out to JFK, it was really just because it was 3 weeks after the 50-mile national champs. And they happened to be right in State College, Pennsylvania. And I was like, oh, these are really close. They're 3 weeks apart. Like, I'll just have 3 weeks at sea level and I'll just be a vagrant and sleep on couches and sleep in the rental car and do whatever I have to do. And so just slap those two together. And yeah, I mean, the rest is kind of history. I didn't really know what I was getting into, other than that it was going to be prestigious and that it was going to be varied. And so, yeah, I think that would transition well into how we would even train for this thing. But yeah, I would say it was dumb luck. I mean, that I ended up addicted to this race. But then, as someone who prides myself more on being durable and being kind of, I don't necessarily like staying in my lane. I think if I did a 50-mile road race, every 3 months and just whittled away off of my time, I think I could probably do that and finish 85% of the races that I entered, instead of like 50 where most elites are, and at least at the top end when you're really soaring close to the sun. I could definitely have 3/4 of my races or more finished, and I could probably take time off that at least 51% of the time and just kind of like whittle that time down. But that would be just staying in my lane. And I'm not someone that wants to just build this whole career or end up 40 years old and look back and say, wow, I had a good time doing only this tiny little thing that I'm disproportionately good at. Mm-hmm. And so the draw of JFK being this beautiful play in 3 acts of the Appalachian Trail, where it's real, honest, spicy mountain running, and then the CNO Canal, where it's like really honest running, but it's also gravel, which I just have this really wonderful affinity to. I love the like alpha waves of the repetitiveness and that little shake as your foot settles and the sound and all of it. I just have such an affinity for gravel, and then to hit the pavements and just have beautiful like Americana split rail fences. And it stirs something in me beyond just the fact that it's like, you got to have freaking trail chops, and then you got to be able to run fast, and then you have to kind of like hold your shit together for the last 8.5 miles of rolling pavement, because you're already committed then at that point. So it's just going to be running against the clock. So yeah, me and JFK, man, it's hard not to just get swamped with all of it.
Yeah. And I've heard you talk about it numerous times. I think I know the answer to this question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. And everybody else probably doesn't know this, but what is your most memorable JFK? And when I say memorable, when you went to that race and you finished it and said that was the one, was it your second place to Jim? Was it your fourth place? Was it your third place? Like what was your most memorable?
I mean, I was so sick when I was second to Jim. That was the sickest that I've ever been outside of a bed. I mean, not even like that's not sick where you rally, or that's not even sick where you like watch something on TV. That's like sick where you sit in the shower with it boiling on you and you just lay inert. Like I was so dead. And so it's hard not to say that that was a really formative experience, although I didn't get to run what I was capable of. But because I was so screwed, I was, every single mile was just like, I just held my hand out to the mile marker on the C&O Canal and put my hand to my chest, and I breathed it in. I can get goosebumps just thinking about it. And I had this little moment to myself out there and just said, man, the Western intellect is saying, let me find something out here to save other people from having to experience this ever, because this is just a horrendous way to race. And every mile that I get that I don't literally fall over and lay in the dirt is just a win. And so there's a Buddhist practice where you'll dedicate the merit of your own selfish practice, right? And so that was just kind of what I was doing out there. Just God, I hope I can find something that people would find valuable. But then, man, my 5:40, whatever it was, out there for fourth place, it was my fastest time and it was my worst placement. And there's something beautiful about that, because like I really don't give two shits about my placement out there. I want to run what I'm capable of running, and that's freaking it. And if I'm 100th place or I'm DFL or I win is so far second on that list than just running what I think I can run. You know, if I could just have a drama-free, whatever it is, like hour 50 first split through there to get onto the C&O Canal, and then have 5:59 pace through the C&O Canal, and then maintain whatever reasonable is, like 6:30x maybe, just the death march into the finish. It's like, I would be so happy with that. And if it takes me another 10 years, I'll come back and do it. I mean, I'll do it. And so the 5:40x was the closest that I've come to that, where everything just clicked and everything was right. And it wasn't as magical. Like my fitness wasn't as perfected as it was in previous years relative to the course, but I don't know that it'll ever be perfect for what I want coming into it. But the mind space and all of it, I mean, that was the year. I've talked about this in passing on other shows, where that was the year where I trained myself. I would get all giddy and excited to come the pavement onto the gravel at my house, just on the side of the road. And I was training myself and wiring this stuff. And what I'm realizing now, diving into like proper Taoist sexual practices, is when you're fully charged, that's when you're at your strongest manifestation abilities, right? Is when you're fully activated and you're flooded with goosebumps and your primal energy is flowing. And what I was doing is I was kind of incorporating these like lengthy sex dates in with this practice of like training myself to have this orgasmic full body response up my spine to gravel. So then I got into the JFK course, and I didn't think about it, because the trail, obviously, like the trail takes all of your, everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the mouth. And it's like, that trail's a good punch in the mouth to make you stop thinking about your plan. But then without thinking about it, I got on that gravel and started getting to that flow. Yeah. And like my whole body, I can feel it up the back of my head now. It's just like, boom, yes. So there was something so cool to just love that. It's like when you see a sled dog just pulling into the vest and just hammering and loving it, and the tongue's flowing, and they're not looking at their watch and controlling their damn heart rate. They're pushing in because it feels so good, and just push. And to connect with that is even ahead of the total time. That is like the absolute goal for me, is to get to that place.
Yeah, well, a couple things there that I think that, any single runner that runs JFK can latch onto was the first thing you said about the mile marker. You're sick as a dog, and you just get to that mile marker and you reach out, you see it, you feel it. Me being a seven-time JFK runner, it's so true. That you hit the trail and it's like, okay, I'm off the trail. Great. I did the trail. And then you look for those posts, you look for those mile markers. And when you get to mile 38, 42, it's like, where is that damn marker? Right. So I think just what you said about just leaning into it and knowing, just get to the next marker, And however anybody wants to kind of use that in their own way, right? I think is helpful. But I think another thing you said about not worrying about the place. I think too many times, athletes and runners go into JFK and they have this mindset of, I've got to run a sub 10. I've got to run a sub 9. I'm guilty of it. Last year I said, I have to run this time. I put so much effort into a training block. I fell short of my goal, but it was by far the greatest JFK I've ever had, right? And I built up this time, and all it was a time. Now I can say that, yeah, the middle 13 miles between 27 and 42 were a puke fest, right? Take that out, right? It was the best race I've ever had, probably. So to your point, like, take all of it away. I think people need to really look at when you cross the finish line, right? Did you enjoy yourself? Did you have a good time? Did you kind of really lean into it? So I think a lot of things you said will resonate with everybody. And that's kind of what, we also wanted to ask you as an elite, somebody who's at the front, right? And I'm sure you've gotten these questions before, is what tips would you give to somebody, whether they're trying to be in the front, whether they're middle of the pack or all the way in the back? What are some of the tips that you would say have done it as much as you have, and the knowledge you have, high level tips you give anybody to tackle JFK specifically?
Well, first we should own it. I hate being in like 10th place or 15th place. Like, I would love to say I always envied that. I always looked up to that. I always wanted to emulate that and be that person that can just like mechanically run my pace and, we'll reel them in when we get to them. But I am so much more emotional than that. And I've come to kind of accept that that's okay. And that's where a lot of my, power comes from, is like, if I can get out front and I can run scared, unless it's really, really dumb to do so, I would just prefer to do so. And the part of the like really hard part for me as an individual, my idiosyncratic cross to bear with JFK, is my strongest section is the C&O Canal, and my second strongest section narrowly is the roads at the end. And so the trail is like, it's my fourth strongest section out of 3 sections, right? Like, I run trails because it's fun and I live in the mountains and it's great and I can hold my own in a given year. But like, I don't love running trails like I love the simple rhythmic, road. And so it's just not. And then everyone else, it's the opposite, right? Everyone else, like, that trail section is their strongest section. And I would roll that into, as long as we're owning that I also hate being back there and it bothers the hell out of me. I would roll that into my first tip, which is figure out how to pace yourself on that trail and stick to that, because people are freaking hammering. It's like my last time out at JFK, I got off course and it's like I was running with people that are, I don't know, 40th place, 50th place or whatever, and they're hammering. Like, a lot of these people are going so hard. If you put a heart rate monitor on them, or even better, since it's cool in the morning and you're fresh, you don't really know, if you put like a glucose monitor on them to see their blood sugar going through the roof, or you could put a power meter on them, even like a stride, and see their power at like faster than their half marathon output pace. It's like, you're going too hard. And the average person, the few interactions I've had around people of like, hey, that's probably too hard for you, and trying to say, obviously, if you go easier here, you could be able to go faster here. Well, I'm a trail runner, so I'm just going to get it while the getting's good. You're going to hemorrhage so much time. And not just that, who cares about time? You're going to hemorrhage so much joy that you should be having later, to be still rattling off 7:15s or 9:15s or whatever it is, late on the canal, while you're hammering 9:15 pace up a literal mountain on the Appalachian Trail. And so I think tempering that first part is the hardest thing to do. But with that in mind, you don't have to be shy. The first half mile or 3/4 of a mile or whatever to that little, it's a roundabout now, is downhill and it's fast. Like, open up the legs, let them go, go have a half marathon in the buildup, so it's not foreign to your body to run fast. But sections that are downhill, sections that feel good, sections that you're confident about, let it go. But sections that are uphill and technical, and maybe it's snowy or maybe it's loose, I think people are going so freaking hard in that first little bit. Certainly harder than they will go until way, way late in the race, if they can even touch that again. Or they might think they're going that hard up like the wall coming off of the C&O Canal at mile 42.5-ish, but they just think that because they're so wrecked from going out too hard. So I think the pacing is definitely an art, not a science. But there are some metrics that we could take and say, this is way too hard. I lean on a power meter a ton. That I love my stride. It's like my favorite piece of tech that I actually like to use regularly. And I think there's something to knowing what like critical power is uphill versus flat versus downhill, to kind of regulate what too hard is. And so I think if people tempered that, and then it's definitely something for people looking to go a little faster, I would consider carrying less. I know we can kind of just transition to that now if that's kosher. And
Yep.
I've done it on a waist belt every year. I've changed shoes twice. I was kind of determined to not change shoes, but then in the super shoe era, there's really no way around it. The benefit that you're getting, especially in just abuse tolerance on something specifically like a pair of Alpha Flies, where they're just going to help you so much more as the miles go by. It's not a matter of making the fast pace feel easier, because it's still going to feel fast if you're trying to compete. It's a matter of that the back 8 are going to suck a whole lot less if you're just mechanically so much more sound. And the Alpha Flies certainly justify, in my case, came in, grabbed a thing of water, like drained some water, took a shot of KE1, like a ketone ester salt drink mix, and took that. Might have even taken a Morton 100-calorie deal as I'm changing shoes, and then had the shoes on and took off. So it's like that was a very, very useful 45 seconds to change my shoes, or even less. And then you can have proper toothy trail shoes to really get you through the Appalachian Trail section. So to the extent that I'm someone to recommend anything for anybody, it seems like a good idea to change shoes, and it seems like a good idea to carry less and go with a waistband and waist belt rather. And then what I did is I've had, I don't know, at least maybe every year, I think I've started with nothing in that waist belt, or like a ketone shot, and that's it. So I'm coming into, an hour 50 into the race, and I've had no water, no appreciable calories, no nothing, because I think it's cool. You're moving fast. It should be relatively easy. If you're hydrated well, or even like hyperhydrated before that race going in, it shouldn't cost you anything. And that's one of those things where if you were going to take, even for a leading woman, I would say you should probably take some fluid, because then you're dealing with like 215, 220, 230. It's like, it's right on that line of like an hour 45. No one should bring fluid. It's worth it. Save the time, save the fumbling with it on technical trails, save the weight, and just hydrate properly beforehand. But then, somewhere right around that 2-hour mark, it becomes a point of conversation. But I would go light, really light to that point, because you're going uphill, and how much fumbling you're going to do with all that stuff. And then, while you're changing shoes, boom, that's your chance to slam half a liter of fluid, a salt pill, whatever else you want, and then take off out of there.
Yeah. I know we've talked about, a lot of the athletes that we have that do JFK, do you go light? Do you go heavy? Do you change shoes? And if you've got a crew, if you've got somebody that's crewing you, or multiple people, that's an ultra that has so many aid stations. And I'm not saying you have to get all your fuel from an aid station, but I mean, it's a really good tip, I think, just to think about what you're putting on your body. I mean, a lot of the athletes may be in the 3 hour to 3:30 coming off the trail, and so that's a lot of time that they're out there.
Yeah.
But how much do you really need to carry, right? Do you need to carry 100 gels, right, in that time? Maybe not. Yeah. But again, that's a section you won't see your crew until mile 16 when you get off of the trail. From there, you're going to see them a few more times, right? So I think that's another thing we always incorporate is making sure the mile, where you're at, right, and plan accordingly.
Yeah. I think if you can carry a little less, I mean, I get it that you want to get ahead on your nutrition and hydration and everything, but just the way that your kidneys work, the way that your hydrational hormones work, you're not going to override some of that stuff. You can slam all the fluid you want. All it's going to do is make you piss more on the canal, where you might have too many people around you to just pee in flight out there. So I think there's something to getting that just right. And I understand that's soaring a little bit far from the earth for some people, but it's not quite close to the sun yet. So I think that's still within the realm of a talking point.
Well, I'll tell you what, that's what got me on my issue last year at JFK was I tried to front load all my calories. I mean, I trained with calories, but I was trying to do, probably 1,000 calories, on the trail. I mean, imagine that 1,000, right? And it was a mixture of, liquid calories and gels. And, I hit mile 24 and my stomach gave out on me. Right. So I think, hearing you say like, take less, right. And I've practiced that since then. I've been like, okay, I knew exactly what I did wrong. Right. But just hearing you say, hey, carry less kind of resonates. So. Yeah.
I mean, I think I would bet because of how your glycogen system really works, when we really get in there and we actually deplete it, we don't just pull off skim exercise science studies done on 155-pound male college undergraduates. It's like, if we really look at what you're doing on the ends of these things, I would bet if you would have done 0 calories or like 100 calories on the trail and then got off the trail ready to crush and just took like shotgun Mortons every 10 minutes, you'd probably do fine. Like, you probably could have done 1,000 calories the following, over the next 2 hours, and you'd probably be raging. You'd probably be rowdy.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think I got to figure out the whole tempering my pace on the trail, because I went out a little bit too quick. I probably paced the trail last year better than ever have. I was in the 2 hour and 50 range, which is good for me. But it was probably a little bit too quick. Probably at mile 13, I actually was going up a hill, and I remember thinking, I got to start walking, because I could feel it. I knew I was pushing a little bit too hard. But yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. So what else? And any other last tips that you think, you want to throw out there for anybody running JFK or anybody running an ultra in general?
I think training wise, certainly for JFK, part of my self-induced ignorance with like my second year or maybe my third year doing JFK was that my first year, I did all the prep races perfectly on accident, like total, again, dumb luck. I would love to take credit for it. I can't. I was basically preparing as if I was going to do like a 50-mile gravel race, right? Which is about what I was prepping for, I suppose, with the national champs. That was what my training was for. But then my racing on the weekends, I was racing like I was a legit mountain runner. Like, I did sky running national champs. I did stagecoach that year, the first 34 miles of the 100-mile relay, which is like through Flagstaff, and it's the highest and spiciest. Baby skulls for like whatever, miles and miles and miles of it. I did a 5K in town. I did a whatever it was, like a half marathon out in Pagosa Springs. Like, on the weekends, I was bushwhacking and racing and doing like this. The sky running national champs has sections that was, back in the day, had sections that were off trail. It finished the 30-some mile race with basically a vertical kilometer course. So it's like, I was spicy, right? I mean, I had trail chops like I haven't had since. And so in my preparation for my second year or my third year, I wasn't even considering how technical the Appalachian Trail was, because I had desensitized myself with all the crazy nar that I was doing, that I didn't even register that it was a thing to prepare for, because I was so prepared for it. Now, that's the place that you want to be in. That's the place where you want to have your workout Wednesdays, that you're acting like you're a marathoner, or you're acting like you're a 50K specialist, where you're doing a marathon workout, but you're doing it depleted, maybe stuff like that. But then on the weekends, you're doing VK stuff. You're doing the spiciest stuff you can get your hands on, or get your feet on in this case, maybe feet and hands in a perfect world, and getting out there and just scrambling around, because that's the kind of thing that will peel back that layer of what registers as tension inducing kind of, spicy trail. I think that's the biggest thing that, hindsight being 2020, that if and when I go back to JFK, whenever I get the itch or the sponsor incentivization to do so, that's something that I will emulate again. I'll prep as if I'm going to do a road, maybe even, it's almost like 6 days a week you're prepping for like Javelina 100, right? Gravel, flat, fast, but long. And then on that 7th day out of the week, you're a vertical kilometer athlete. Like, you're a short course Team USA mountain athlete, and you need to get out there and scramble around on stuff that's trying to kill you. I think that's the perfect formula.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's one thing that is a challenge for a lot of the athletes here on the East Coast. Even though we have trails right in our backyard, a lot of the athletes don't have access to it maybe as much as they would want to. So I think it's a good tip is when you can, which on the weekends, a lot of, our athletes, or a lot of the athletes doing JFK that might be in the middle of the pack or even the back of the pack, that's when they have access to the trails. So I think that's a good idea to get out there when you can and hit that.
Yeah.
So,
and that East Coast stuff favors what I'm talking about very well, because your trails are sadistic. I mean, your trails are so technical. So you can get exactly what I'm talking about and have very, very overly technical trails easier than someone in, LA probably could. I mean, to my knowledge, like you'd have to go looking for technicality out there because everything's so buffed out. And so I think that East Coast, someone in the East Coast, I would more think you have to make sure that they're running. Because I think that's a lot of problems with ultra runner types, is they want to go out there and just hike up, jog down all day long. And then they get to a race and it's, okay, here's a heavy marathon in the middle where you need to rattle off 7-minute miles or 8-minute miles or whatever it is, and you need to rattle off your Boston qualifying time in the middle of this race. They're like, I've been hiking up mountains for 3 months. It's like, all right, did you not know what? I mean, I see people do the same thing with the Leadville 100, where they're just doing these 9-hour days out there, fully fueled, playing around on like Mount Massive, where it's technical and 14,000 feet, and they're not doing a step almost. And then they get to Leadville and realize, oh, 40 of this 50 miles out and then 40 of the 50 miles back is basically a road marathon. Like, it's very, very fast. And I think that throws a lot of ultra types for a loop. So train for the conditions that you're getting into. But I think that sound bit we just rattled through, that's 100%. That's as refined as I can get it. If I could bottle and sell my wisdom, that would be it.
Perfect. So you answered my question. I heard you say you don't know when you're coming back to JFK. You coming back?
I don't know. I don't know. Make me an offer.
Make it up. You got a place to stay. You know, you're welcome anytime.
That's big. Yeah, that's big. Having a place to stay in a crew. You know my love language, Scott. But I would like to take a crack at a 50 mile that's actually flat and actually fast. And elite mortality is about 50%. So for those other people that really don't like being in 10th place coming off the Appalachian Trail, know that 5 of those people in front of you are going to quit anyway. So, and my history at JFK pans that out perfectly. 3 finishes, 3 drops. And I'm not sure when I'm going to come back or even what the goal would be if I did. But for right now, I would like to take that similar enough fitness and put that towards actually running a fast 50. I want to run 450 something for a finish time for a 50 miler. And if I have a good day, or if I can run that, if I can just go run 455 or 457 with very little drama and not really getting too worked up or emotional about it, just go there and just run it and have that bliss. And I love running 550-ish pace anyway. So if I can just indulge for almost 5 hours, that'll feel really good. And then I don't know if that's going to then turn the wheels of, okay, you can definitely do this for after you get off the Appalachian Trail. And I have some trail chops this season. I don't know. Sometimes I kind of just get into the vibe and I accidentally stumble into really good trail fitness. And that's the kind of thing that would just back me into it in a fall, and fall's a good time. But right now it's flat, fast 50s. Things like Tunnel Hill, or like I just secured my spot for the Chicago Lakefront 50 miler on Halloween weekend. And so that's a chance to really rattle off a fast 50 mile time. Even if I'm alone fighting the wind out there in Chicago, that should do it.
Yeah. Well, Anthony, thanks for the time, man. So I know you got some tacos to get to, and we got some weather to tend to here, but thanks for coming on.
Yeah, man. Kidney tacos, organ meat.
All righty. We'll see you in Durango soon.
Yes. Yeah. It sounds great.
All right, man. See ya.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us for the JFK 50 mile episode. It has been a lot of fun to talk amongst ourselves and to share some information and race intel for those of you who are listening and are coming to this event or thinking about coming to this event in the future. Again, we are More Miles Run Coaching and the More Miles Podcast. You can find us as the More Miles Podcast wherever you listen. You can also find us as a coaching team at More Miles Run Coaching on social media. That's Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. All right. I think that's it for today. We've covered this pretty well. Thank you guys so much for joining me and geeking out about this race that we enjoy so much.
This was a blast. Thanks.